Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Science New and Critic. Today, I have Rachel, who I'm super excited to be introducing in a moment. But first, I'm going to introduce myself. So, I am Ekua and the author of Being the One Cheerleader, which has just recently been published. Woo! And that book uses the entrepreneurial journey to talk about fighting fear, putting yourself out there, and building a growth mindset. So, without further ado, let us get on to talking with Rachel. How are you, Rachel, today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes. I would really love to start by asking you, what's your story? Tell us a bit about your background. What do you do and why do you do it?
Sure. So, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I love connecting with other women who also kind of support the same mission. So, that is great. And in terms of me and my
Oh, oh, Rachel, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes. Sorry, if you could just restart that. We lost you for a second with the sound.
Sure, no problem. So, in terms of me and my background, I've always been a multi-passionate individual with a nonlinear path, and that's kind of my whole, personal and professional identity. And so, I am relatively early in my career, about 3.5 years in, and I had studied political science and history in undergrad, and then kind of pivoted a little bit to get my master's in management. And after that, I moved from Florida, where I grew up, to Washington, D.C. to kind of begin my career as a consultant for IBM. Had nothing to do with the location, I just wanted to live there. And so since then, I've worked mainly in the organizational change and employee experience space in our talent and transformation group. And currently, I'm kind of in a different internal role, working for our company rather than working for external clients. And I'm serving as a program lead for employee engagement. And in this role, I just kind of manage, a whole portfolio of different initiatives around coaching, development, learning, diversity, and inclusion. And on the side of that, I am also a certified IBM Blue Core coach, which is a role that really just allows me to do what I enjoy doing most and help elevate and guide others through their own professional experience and help them realize their strengths. And so I'm excited to have connected with you because you share that same passion. And I hope to someday bring that passion externally outside of IBM and kind of just build a similar kind of community.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you for that really great opening. And also welcome to the person who's just joined. We're going to be chatting to Rachel for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And if you've got any questions, please do just put them into the chat. So, Rachel, the next question is, as you're giving us a brief overview of what you're doing now, how has your early career experience been, as a woman? Have you had to overcome any challenges and how have you gone about resolving them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me has been imposter syndrome, which nobody is a stranger to, but especially in my role as a consultant, where clients are looking to me to be the expert. I'm somebody who is, relatively petite and young, sound young, look young, and all of that, and that never helps. But it's a really hard mental barrier to overcome. And when I first started out, the first thought in my head was, what am I as a 22-year-old to tell somebody twice my age with twice my experience what to do? And it's kind of everyone says fake it till you make it. And I still don't know how much I believe that, but it is good advice to follow when it comes to being confident and presenting yourself confidently. I don't know how the other person receives it, but it's one of those things where, your thoughts become your actions and your actions become your habits.
For sure. I mean, and also as someone who is younger in the career, you're exposed to different ideas and of different sort of like software. So you might be bringing something that people who are older than you aren't able to kind of see as easily. So actually, you might be at an advantage. Have you thought about that?
Absolutely. And that's also, the feedback and advice that I've also gotten from older colleagues. It's, they don't know everything. And I mean, those are the best ones to work with when they're, quick to admit that, they learn from us as much as we learn from them.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's a two-way street. And everyone's got something to bring and to offer, and no matter their age or their stage in their career.
Exactly.
So yeah. So let's talk a little bit about digging into getting feedback about your career. And generally like obviously you're on have a relationship with your manager. And at some point, when you have your end of year review or your KPIs, you have to get feedback and you have to receive that. So can you tell us about like how you navigate listening to feedback and how you discern what to listen to and what not to?
Yeah, I've learned a lot just from getting feedback. And there are a few things I have to kind of say about it. And the first one is that you really have to listen to everything, but understand that you're not going to like everything that you hear. And you also have to understand that not everything you hear is going to necessarily be valid. And it's up to you to be able to use your discretion and distinguish, you know, what do you like that's valid? What do you not like that is still valid? And then, what might not hold a complete truth to it. And there are a few ways that you can do this. And for me, I found what has been extremely helpful is to really examine the source of your feedback. So, who is it coming from? What is the lens through which they're observing things? And that's different. And if you know somebody and know their perspective, a lot of people can come at something from two different angles. And it really kind of helps to take a step back and look at it through that. The second thing is, how is the feedback delivered? So feedback, like best practice, is to deliver it incrementally and over time and proactively, and also provide a path to action. And in all the occurrences in which I've gotten negative feedback, meaning had a negative experience getting it, it was when I was pulled into a room and just had, months worth of thoughts dumped on me without any clear path forward. And it doesn't help either party that way. Um, so that's kind of been a good metric for me to understand, what do I want to hold on to? What do I need to let go of? And then what do I need to grow from?
For sure, for sure. And I think you make a good point when you say like, where is feedback coming from, and like who is giving that feedback? Because I think sometimes, when we think about how to apply a filter, we need to think about, where the people are coming from, but also their worldview and our worldview, because sometimes there's a mismatch. And it's not necessarily they have a wrong worldview, but it's might be their worldview is not as big as ours, so therefore they can't see the scope of what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to do, and therefore the feedback might not be as helpful in moving us forward, because it might be limiting our scope or our potential. But it's from a place where that's because that's where they see themselves as opposed to you. And so it's good to get diverse feedback so that you can see how other people would do that same thing and understand where else you could, find feedback that either allows you to think about what you want to do, and how you want to grow, or allows you to just get a different perspective and kind of like sense check what you've heard in the first instance.
Exactly. And I always solicit a variety of perspectives too. And I found that really helps because, I mean, in one experience that really sticks out in my mind where I got a ton of negative feedback just from one individual, it kind of like was my only reference point for, what I thought of myself. And then afterwards, I had gotten feedback from different people who had kind of observed me through the same situation, same project, and it didn't match up. And so to me, that was very telling that I can't just take it at face value. I have to apply a filter, as you said.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's really helpful advice for everyone. And the steps that you went through are really clearly set out, and I think help everyone to kind of like navigate that thought, because it is a bit tricky when you get feedback that isn't inherently positive. But we need that feedback to be able to really like think and reflect ourselves about is it constructive and can it actually help us to learn, grow, to find out ways that we can stretch ourselves, because sometimes we have to have a bit of discomfort to be able to move forward.
Exactly.
So let us move on to the next question, and that is about learning and development. So obviously, as someone who's early in your career, like what kinds of things do you do to kind of like stretch yourself to learn and develop? Do you have a mentor? Do you have a coach? Or do you spend hours on YouTube? What is it for you?
Yeah, for me, it's all of the above. Many mentors and many coaches. And I think with that, it's really important to make sure you have a diverse network of mentors and coaches. And so I have relationships that have been so valuable to me in different ways. And, mentors closer in age to me, I find are more relatable. And then ones who are more experienced kind of help me see the bigger picture of things in my career, which I often have trouble doing. And so I think it's important to kind of have an all encompassing network of coaches and mentors who can help support you. And then I would also suggest being open to new experiences and never charting your path too clearly. And as somebody who's like a meticulous planner and hates ambiguity, I've actually found that that's like the worst thing that you could possibly do when charting your career. And it kind of just ties back to the point that, there are jobs that will exist 5 years from now that don't exist today that, might be perfect for you. And opportunities that you never would have imagined existed that you'll just kind of hear about organically in the future. And so I would say plan, but plan cautiously and plan lightly and be open and flexible.
Yep, no, that is definitely some really, really great advice. And for you, like, how has the networking helped you to kind of like find out new ideas and be exposed to, I guess, different ways to progress through your career? Like, do you find using LinkedIn really good, or like what other places do you go to network?
I really just started using LinkedIn more actively. It was kind of just, my repository for all my stuff before, but I've started using it more actively. And it's kind of like the whole social media thing where like you find somebody through somebody else, and, read things and relate back to other people. So that's been helpful. I've also found Alpha very helpful, where I connected with you, which is the network for women in technology. And then also even within my own company, which I'm trying to break out of too, because it's good to also build your external network. But because the company I work for is so large and so
Yeah.
global, we have our own internal, directory system. And I kind of network through there and just, search for people with similar interests, schedule one-on-one conversations with people I've never met or might not have a connection to. And you never know where it may lead. And I can, cite several times where I've connected with people who I thought were total strangers, and we found out that we have a lot more in common than met the eye.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely so true. I agree. You should definitely put yourself out there. And if you have a big company, it's worth like networking to different parts in different parts of the world, because you just never know where you might find yourself, and whose path you'll cross. So that is one thing for sure. And especially now that we're all in this sort of virtual environment, it's a lot easier to get opportunities to perhaps go on Zoom or WebEx or whatever you think you might be using at work.
Absolutely. And having only been in the workforce for like 3.5 years, I've already found that people have come back around in like the most fortuitous of ways. And if I've experienced that within such a short period of time, I just kind of think over, the long term, how is that going to work 10 years or 20 years from now? I might have people come back in my life. And so it kind of goes back to the thing like, give everyone a chance, be kind to everyone, because you never know what might come out of it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I just want to talk a little bit about resilience. And obviously, it's been a really interesting time with COVID-19 and how people have had to adapt and be flexible. But what does resilience mean to you? And how have you taken action to get over setbacks that you might experience?
Yeah. So to me, resilience means being kind to yourself. And the only way I found to recover from setback is to be kind to yourself, because a lot of us with a strong inner critic, our first instinct is to really just admonish ourselves and amplify whatever sort of voices might be coming at us externally. And I haven't quite cracked the code on the feedback piece, but I would just say really consider the setback for what it is and think about what you can control versus what you can't control. Because a lot of times, what cripples our resilience is trying to control what we cannot control. And just to kind of look at the big picture, think about what facts or evidence you have to know that the setback is really going to hold you back in the long term and move forward from it.
Yeah, I think that's really, really great advice. I think the other thing is that like you have to like embrace and accept that if something has gone wrong or something is unexpected, that you acknowledge that, but you just don't stay in that pit negativity for like too long. You have a moment to get over that and to like have a little time to be like, yeah, okay, that didn't work out, or that's just, I don't feel great about that. But at the end of the day, you let it go, and then you reflect on that piece, and you think about, actually, what did I learn? How can I move forward from that? How can I make sure that I can do it differently, that I can get the help that I need, or that I can really just take it apart and do it in like a different way that I imagined, because this construction was not the way that I had hoped for, but I have definitely learned from that experience.
Yeah, I think it's about letting the setbacks almost re-energize you, because it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy if you're just wallowing in like this despair and self-pity from, not achieving what you set out to achieve. So I think it's like, acknowledge it, be sad, be upset, and then move on and kind of just vouch to do better.
For sure, for sure. So the question of the hour: what does the inner critic mean to you?
I think the whole thing with the inner critic is it just goes back to like the common understanding that you are your own worst enemy. And I know I'm my own worst enemy. But the inner critic is really just that voice inside of you that eats away at your confidence and self worth and amplifies any bit of external criticism that you receive. But like any other voice, you can dial down the volume and it isn't who you are.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So thinking of that, like, what is it that you do to help yourself like manage that and like know that it does not define you?
Yeah, so I don't believe that somebody can silence their inner critic. I think it's one of those things, the more you try to silence it, the more it fights back and speaks up. But I do believe in acknowledging it, as you talked about earlier, and then dialing down the volume. And to do this, you just have to almost speak to yourself like you would speak to your best friend. Because when you think about it, everything that your inner critic tells you, you wouldn't tell that to your best friend. And it goes back to like, speak to yourself kindly. And when you treat yourself with kindness, you're able to become more resilient. But I would say, I always think about the people who love and support me outside of the immediate situation, usually a work situation that I'm in, and what they would say to me if they knew about this voice in my head, or, if that voice was coming from some bully. And you just have to kind of give yourself the same grace.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that when you said be kind and compassionate to yourself, it's so easy to be your own worst critic and be really like uncompassionate to yourself, which is kind of funny because you spend the most time with yourself, and yet it's easy to not give yourself, that love and attention and that care that you'd give your friend, your pet, your partner, your kids, whoever. So I think it's good to remind ourselves that actually it's better that we, it's not to say that we don't acknowledge our flaws, but it's to say that we do try to give ourselves opportunity to learn and to grow, and not just to be overly negative, so that we're not actually productive and moving forward with our personal development.
I agree. Yep.
Mm, mm. So let us talk about the book, which you had a little chance to have a sneak preview on. Tell us about what you have learned from it and any thoughts that you have that can inform this chat today.
Yeah, so I really like the message that came across in chapter 9. That really stuck out to me. And my main takeaway from that is that you know more than you think you know. And I think that is really foundational to developing your self confidence. And I think what crippled me a lot, and what served as a major source of my negative feedback, was my lack of self confidence. And especially as somebody who battles imposter syndrome a lot, the last thing that we want to do is to admit that we actually do know what we're talking about, because it's like giving ourselves or giving into the truth that we're trying to avoid. But what I found is that there have been situations where I'll ask for help, and sometimes the more I ask for help, the more incompetent I feel, and it kind of goes into giving into that prophecy of self doubt. So I found that, after all is said and done, I realized I actually was fully capable of doing the thing that I set out to ask about in the first place. And I think to kind of combat this, anytime you're in a challenging situation, you just have to stop and think. And a lot of us who are self critical like to get things done. We're very type A, we like to move quickly, but that can actually put us at a disadvantage. And I think we really just need to pause, reflect, think about the resources and tools that we do have before we ask for help, and then feel empowered in asking for help, but also know that you kind of did your homework beforehand.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. And I think the other thing about thinking about the imposter syndrome and holding yourself back is to think before you say no. Give yourself like a time to reflect and to actually ask a mentor, ask a friend, I'm struggling with an opportunity that I, want to go for, but my instinct is to say no because I don't think that I'm good enough, or I don't think that I have the, skills or experience. Why not just put a pause before you say no, and give yourself that space and that time, and to talk to someone else to see if actually, well, you could do this and you are really able to do this. Because just by going with the reflex action, you don't give yourself the opportunity, but by putting a pause on it, at least you have time to then consider and be able to decide whether it truly is something that you can or you can't do, or whether you want to do it at a different time and come back to it. It might be something you work up to.
Exactly. And I mean, on that note, I would also say pause before you say yes, because a lot of us who have a strong inner critic are also serial overcommitters. And I know that to be the case with myself. And sometimes it puts us in situations where, it makes our inner critic stronger because we're spread so thin, and you can't succeed when you're doing so many things. And every time you fall short, that inner critic is going to get louder and louder. So it's kind of about just keeping a good gauge on, what is the right amount that I can manage.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So tell us how you bounce back when you have a tough day, like what keeps you motivated, because these are really interesting and challenging times out there.
Yeah, I think the number one thing for me that I always remember, and a mentor of mine was the one who really just kind of introduced me to this idea, is that tough days don't last forever. And I mean, if you just think back over the course of the past year, you've had days that have been a lot worse than others. And, you wake up the next day and sometimes it's not better, but sometimes it is. And I think that's just a good thing to remember, that how you're feeling now isn't necessarily how you're going to feel tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think it's just having that knowledge that it's temporary, and that you have opportunities to start again, and to move on. I think that is definitely something we should all try to kind of move towards in our mindset. Because I think if you feel that things are permanent, then it's harder for you to kind of like have that bounce back and that resilience. But if you try to shift towards things are temporary and things will get better, and that even though it's not perfect now, or even though it's bad today, there's always a possibility that it can get better. I think it just helps you to have more balance in your life, because otherwise you just feel so it feels so murky, because it's a constant cloud, and it's not like you feel that it's a transitory thing.
Yeah, and I heard this term recently. It's like, I think I've seen it like in books and podcasts, but it's getting unstuck. And I think what you need to do to get unstuck is to just always put it in perspective and remind yourself that, you have several days, years ahead of you, and the current moment is just current. That's what it is.
For sure, for sure. So just before we wrap up, does anyone have any questions? I'll just give us a little pause to see if there are any questions, and then if not, we will get to the final question. Okay, so Rachel, it has been fantastic talking to you. Lastly, I'd like to ask you: do you have anything that you'd like to share? Any causes, or anything that you're working on, and how can we keep in touch?
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and I'm really excited to just kind of, see where this whole series goes. And I look forward to attending future ones. But in terms of staying in touch with me, I am reachable on LinkedIn. And then I'm also pretty active on Alpha. So if you're a female and want to be part of a really awesome and supportive community of women in tech, then I would recommend joining Alpha.
Oh, amazing. Let's just see what we have in the comments. So our joiner says, thank you for the conversation. It was great to hear you both talking and sharing ideas. Well, thank you for joining us. Okay, well, I think thank you so much, Rachel. We have learned a lot in this like half an hour. We can't wait to see where you go from strength to strength in the future. And yeah, we will keep in touch.
That sounds great. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.